Six very different candidates want to be Ohio's leader in these politically volatile times, and the University of Akron's Bliss Institute of Politics is hosting a series of interviews for you to get a clearer picture who you think should sit in the governor's office and who would be best for you and your family. I'm Tom Beres, a former senior political correspondent for decades at Channel 3 in Cleveland, and I'm here this afternoon with Richard Cordray, Democratic candidate for governor, former director of the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And again, all our interviews are going to be posted on the Bliss Institute Facebook page, the University of Akron's YouTube channel, WKYC Channel 3, all being streamed live. So, Richard, may I call you Richard?
Richard, Rich, whatever you'd like.
Okay, Rich, thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it. All right, so let's talk about some campaign elements here. You're having Elizabeth Warren come in to speak on your behalf. What do you think she will add to your campaign in terms of a little excitement, energy, and issues that she brings to the table?
She adds a lot. She's a good friend of mine from the work I did in Washington. She recommended me to President Obama to head the new Consumer Bureau that she cares deeply about. Later, she was elected to the Senate and became a strong defender of the work we were doing to stand on people's side, see that they're treated fairly in the financial marketplace, and ultimately put $12 billion back in consumers' pockets around the country, including people all over Ohio. So pleased to have her here. She brings a lot of energy and a lot of interest. Notably, we're having an event in Cincinnati on the opioid crisis because Senator Warren has dug into that in Massachusetts, where it's also a problem, although not nearly the scope of the problem that we have here in Ohio.
Okay, so you expect her to have a resounding connection with Democrats here?
I think she does, absolutely. People are excited to see her, and I am too.
All right. Campaign development today. I understand that your TV ad, your much anticipated TV ad, is now on the air, featuring President Obama. Tell us about the ad and tell us what message you're hoping it sends.
I saw it this morning. I was here in Akron at the Akron Family Restaurant meeting with ministers and public officials, and we were talking, and I looked up, there's a big screen TV in the corner of the room, and I said, well, there we are. So that was gratifying. It's an ad that features the fact that President Obama appointed me to head that Consumer Bureau, to set it up and to run it, and to make sure that we were making sure that big financial institutions treated people fairly and didn't cheat them and mistreat them, which was an important priority for him, and obviously the work that I did for the last 6 years.
So you believe President Obama will be an asset to your campaign?
I absolutely do.
And do you anticipate he will be here personally to campaign on your behalf?
I hope so and expect so. And what I would say is that I'm proud of the work we did together. It was work on behalf of all Ohioans and people across this country to make sure that they were treated fairly in the financial marketplace. We gave people a voice. We received over 1,300,000 complaints over my time there, and we took actions to make sure that the big banks and financial institutions cleaned up their act and treated people better, and I think it was really important work.
Any idea when he might be here? Is it a little premature to discuss that?
Well, he's right here in my TV ads right now.
Okay, next best thing. All right, you have won some and lost some in your previous statewide campaign efforts, and been a little bit bumpy, I guess, if you check the records, right? You were rejected a couple of times by voters to become Attorney General, once to be a U.S. Senator, one time to be in Congress. Why should Democrats think voters will be more receptive to the 2018 version of Richard Cordray?
Well, look, early in my career, I was trying to make some headway and get some notice and get people to know me around the state. In 2006, I ran for state treasurer. I won the state by 600,000 votes. I served as the treasurer during the financial crisis, and we never lost a penny for the people of this state. And we did a lot of work to help small businesses create jobs and help save thousands of people's homes during the foreclosure crisis. I then ran in the special election, you'll remember this, in 2008, after the resignation in that office, and any Republican could have run against me. In the end, I won that race by 900,000 votes. Got more votes than any Democrat has ever gotten that's a non-presidential candidate in the state of Ohio. In 2010, which in retrospect was a very bad year for Democrats across the country, midst of the recession. The first Obama midterm, I lost by 1 point. So I'm a strong candidate. Have been a strong office holder in the state, built a record as Attorney General of bringing back money from Wall Street for Ohio retirees, $2 billion we got back, and I will run on that record of proven results for the people of Ohio.
Okay, so you feel this is the right time for Richard Cordray and his message and his record?
I think it's a great time. In fact, I think that's a reason why you have many candidates in the race this year, is they all see the same opportunity. There's going to be a swing in the midterm this year going our way rather than against us, the wind at our back rather than the wind in our face. I have the experience I bring back from Washington, D.C. Much like Dick Celeste when he lost the governor's race in 1978. He ran the Peace Corps for a couple of years, then came back and won the governor's race on his next try. I can come back here and say that I've served our country. I've helped consumers, I've helped people across the state. I have a real good, deep knowledge of what we call the kitchen table issues, economic issues that affect families, and that's what we're going to run on this year.
So when this race began, I think many people who are handicappers and pundits and observers and kibitzers all anointed you as the front runner in this race. Mm-hmm. There aren't that many polls being done, not as many as there were in the old days. The one poll that's got all the attention had, Mr. Kucinich and you in a dead heat, I believe, with 21%, and then lots and lots and lots of undecided votes.
Yes. Yes, I've seen
that. Do you
that.
believe that poll's accurate? Do you have internal polling show something different?
No, I've seen several surveys, and generally they show me leading, but one showed us tied. And look, I don't take anything for granted. I don't pay much attention to the, what did you call them, the handicappers and the pundits and the prognosticators. I try to pay attention to the voters, and I think that if you're in a race, you run hard and you run to win. And you put your heart and soul into it, and that's what I'm doing in this race. I'm all over Ohio. It's a bit of a homecoming for me, Tom, because I'm reacquainting myself with lots of people I've worked with in the past and who've supported me in the past and are going to support me again.
So people who say that, yeah, but he spent all that time in Washington and he got sort of detached and he wasn't on the ground and he doesn't understand, the reality of what's happening, what's been happening here, and, I guess another criticism from Mr. Kucinich, yes, but he abandoned his post when we really needed him up there to fight for what he accomplished, and he just handed it over to the Republicans who are going to dismember everything he did.
Okay, so two pieces of that. Both of them are totally wrong. I understand that Dennis often doesn't know what he's talking about, but doesn't let that get in his way. On the first part, I did not go to Washington. I commuted back and forth and was here every weekend with my children, who started off in middle school when I was first doing that job and went all the way through high school. I made that trip back and forth over 300 times at my own expense so that I could be in the community and be part of their life and at the same time serve my country at the same time. I think that that was the right thing for me to do. In terms of whether I, quote, abandoned my post, I did not. I served in that position for 6 years, more than a full term, and I could have served maybe a few more months. The important thing for me to do was to stay on after Donald Trump was elected and to fight for that agency, which I did. I let them know that if they tried to fire me, and people were calling for that every week, that I would fight them, that I would sue them, and that I would push back, and they would have a fight on their hands, and they did not want to do that. I stayed, and we finished an important payday lending rule that has national scope and is law of the land now. And having finished that, there wasn't much more I could do in the few remaining months of my term. I did think that at that point it was time for me to come here, run for governor, and try to change the politics of this state and, I believe, the nation. So that's the important thing for me to do. So you think you were able to do
kind of a 1 foot here, 1 foot there, and stay connected enough to be informed and up to speed on all the important Ohio issues?
Yeah, look, I never moved to Washington. I mean, it's no different than Sherrod Brown or Rob Portman, who go back and forth every week. In my case, it was at my expense because I was choosing to live here with my family. Nobody wanted to move to Washington. So I was all over the country during the week doing my job, but I was here every weekend, going to the high school football games, going to the school activities, and being with my family. That's something I had to do. It was a sacrifice for all concerned, but it was a good thing for me to do, and it gave me a chance to serve my country in an important way and do important work that President Obama appointed me to do, and I'm proud of it.
The lion's share of the media coverage in your race of late seems to have been focused largely on gun and regulation or deregulation issues surrounding it. If you believe some of the scenarios spun by, again, the people who are perhaps watching this race on a daily basis. It's like that's the main issue, and that's what the people of Ohio are most concerned, or at least Democrats are most concerned about. Do you believe that's true? Is that what is most important to the people of Ohio at the moment, or is that just the newspaper script?
Well, I'll tell you what I hear as I go around the state, Tom, and I'm around the state every day, and usually in multiple cities per day and lots of small towns. There are a lot of things on people's minds. There always is. A constellation of issues that matters most to most people has to do with economic issues affecting their families. Access to affordable health care, getting the education and training they and their children need. And by the way, education polls as the #1 issue among Ohioans is what's most on their mind. Jobs and economic development, making sure opportunity is spread throughout the state. There are other issues that are looming large now as well. Guns are a significant issue for Ohioans. The opioid crisis is a significant issue for Ohioans. When you go to different parts of the state, environmental issues like the impairment of Western Lake Erie, which is a dead zone right now, and the state government has done nothing about it, that's a significant issue for a lot of people. So there's a variety of things that matter to people, and one of the things you do as a candidate is go around the state, listen to people, learn from them, and figure out what you need to do that will help deliver results that improve their lives.
So,
But let me just add one thing. One of the things that Betty Sutton and I offer in this race that's really important is we have a track record of getting results that improve people's lives on those kitchen table issues, so that makes us credible as candidates. Everybody can talk. Everybody can offer their plans and their programs. Most people have no way of actually accomplishing those things. In our case, we've done it in the past. We will do it again in the future. We'll deliver for Ohioans.
Again, so much of the coverage seems to make the issue of a ban on semi-automatic military weapons a focal point here. I mean, your running mate, Ms. Sutton, is in favor of such a ban. The Senator Warren, who is coming to campaign for you, is in favor of such a ban. And yet you have remained pretty resolute in not wanting to change your position on this. And a lot of people would say, hey, why does any ordinary citizen need a military weapon that's only designed to kill a lot of people in a very short time? Why is he so intractable on this?
So some people I know want to reduce this big issue of gun violence down to a single slogan or a single slice of it. But the bigger problem is, how do we reduce gun violence in our society? How do we save lives? We have put forward the most comprehensive and the strongest proposal for how to do that, with things that are actually achievable in Ohio, I believe. It involves three things. It involves tightening the gun laws, and there are ways we need to do that, such as universal background checks and banning modifications to legal firearms that turn them into illegal weapons, like bump stocks and high-capacity magazine clips. And those are things I know the NRA opposes, but I think they're the right thing to do for Ohio, and we will push for those. We need a better plan for school safety, and Betty and I have put one forward that I think is in line with what law enforcement thinks needs to be done in Ohio. And third, there are things the governor can do without the legislature that will make a difference to the gun violence. And mayors and others around the state are doing this, and police chiefs and sheriffs, intervening with gangs who commit gun violence to get the guns out of their hands. Intervening when crimes are committed on our streets with a gun, whether or not the gun is used, and punishing those severely. These are things that have been proven to reduce gun violence around the country, and they will make a difference here in Ohio.
So you believe that other steps would be more impactful and effective than having an emotional battle over a weapon that is already has hundreds of thousands, I forget what the exact number is, already out there on the streets.
What I would say is,
these other things are doable, and this maybe not.
The legislature in Ohio has not moved a muscle on this. They have not responded to Parkland. They didn't respond to Sandy Hook. They didn't respond to Las Vegas, to the Pulse nightclub shooting. We need to move them off the dime. We need to get something done. And there are things we can do that will actually reduce the violence and save lives. And I'd like to do that and achieve those things, and that's what we're going to fight to do.
So if you had the ability to wave a magic wand and have there be a ban, Would you do that, or are you pushing it to the side because it's not attainable now?
Look, I don't think it's useful to talk about waving magic wands. You can say those things in a campaign. It's not particularly responsible. Okay. What I like to focus on is what we can actually achieve that will move the ball. And the ball here is, how do we reduce gun violence? How do we save lives? And I think we have things that I've put forward that will actually do that, and that's what I want to focus on.
Do you know what your current NRA standing, ranking, report card is now?
No, I know what it was 8 years ago, but I'm sure it's changing now because I've changed on some of these issues as well. So,
are you a gun owner?
I am not.
Okay. And so I take it you don't have a concealed carry permit either then?
I do not.
All right. Donald Trump has been in office about 15 months. Is Ohio and are the people of Ohio better off or worse off today than they were 15 months ago because of what he has done or not done in his time in office? And please give some examples of why you think the way you do.
So everybody wants me to focus on Donald Trump. I'm not running against Donald Trump. And if I'm governor, I may have to find issues where I'm working with Donald Trump. Although if he's not doing things that are good for Ohio, I will stand and oppose him vigorously, and I will work with other governors to oppose him vigorously. I would say that the tone that we're seeing out of Washington, which is pitting people against one another, sowing a lot of conflict and division, the remarks he made after the Charlottesville events, I thought were really regrettable. And I think they're not
good
the tone
people on both sides. Wasn't that the offending statement?
Moral equivalency. I think it was wrong, and you could see that even members of his own cabinet were deeply disturbed at what they saw, and some of them have left since then. On the economy, we were recovering from the deep recession under President Obama steadily for the last 7 years of his administration. That has continued. All of that is good for Ohio, and we want to see that happen. But I'll tell you, you can talk in terms of averages, and things can look pretty good in terms of averages, but that doesn't mean it's true throughout the state. As I go around the state, there's still a lot of communities that feel left out and left behind, and there are lots of parts of even our more prosperous areas, our big urban counties, that are left out and left behind. We have high poverty figures in some of our big counties. We have an infant mortality rate right now that is a shameful statistic about Ohio, and it is even worse in the African American community, and we need to address these things. And the legislature has devoted no bandwidth to those things. It's been stuck on an ideological agenda, a backward-looking agenda, and I think that we need to move forward in Ohio toward progressive principles and move this state toward the future.
So you raise the point about the legislature's priorities and productivity, or lack of it, as the case may be. What could you do as governor, being a Democrat, trying to work with what likely still will be a predominantly Republican legislature to make them focus on things beside personal behavior issues and whether or not Ohio should have an official dog and other matters besides.
I tweeted about that one. Yes.
Other matters besides, more important things like job creation, health care. Other topics that would be more substantial and make more of a difference to more Ohioans. I mean, what could you do as governor with an opposite party legislature?
Here's what I would say. First of all, I started out in politics. I was in the legislature, and it was a divided government with Republican governor, Republican Senate, Democratic House, and I was very effective in that setting. I got a lot of bills passed, some crime legislation, some children and youth legislation, a community service education bill, a residential, my first foray into consumer protection, requiring sellers of residences to disclose to the buyer material problems like termites and other things that otherwise they might have tried to hide, and people feel cheated and end up in a big fight over that. So I can work across the aisle, and I will do that where we can. But I will say this, what I've seen out of this legislature is not inspiring. On places where they should have been doing something, they've been doing nothing. On places where they shouldn't have been doing anything, they've been doing the wrong things. So for example, take charter schools. They have pushed this experiment of failed for-profit charter schools. We now have the ECOT scandal on our hands. $70 to $80 million missing, 13,000 students completely failed in their education. The graduation rate of that program was only half of that of the Columbus City schools that they supposedly were going to outperform. And on Capitol Square, Millions of campaign contributions have flowed to the Republicans, including Mike DeWine and John Husted and Cliff Rosenberger, and that has been causing them to look the other way and not hold those schools accountable for their attendance and their performance. That's one. Here's another. The state legislature has really warred on local governments and local community services in this state. They have taken money again and again from local governments to make their books look good and to flush the rainy day fund and to give back tax cuts that they brag about. And it's the local communities' money that they're using to do that. And the local communities are starving and hurting, and they feel it around the state. This is police and first responders who are being starved. And by the way, if we're going to solve things like the opioid crisis, how do you do it when the state legislature is fighting local governments? Local governments deliver the services, the mental health and the addiction services. And if they don't have money to even do their basic job, how can they deal with something like that? I mean, we can go on and I can give you more examples,
right.
But we're now seeing scandal on Capitol Square. We just had the Speaker of the House resign in the midst of an FBI investigation over allegations of pay-to-play involving payday lender lobbyists. And we have the ECOT scandal as well. And it is a scandal. There's no other way to describe it, with $70 to $80 million missing, and they're never going to find a way to get it back. People have looked the other way for too long, and we need to clean it up.
So do you think, we've seen this over and over again in Ohio politics, when there's predominantly one party in charge, nobody's minding the hen house, and surprise, here's a scandal at both sides of the street. And
I know you've seen it over several iterations over your career, and it is exactly the phenomenon. We had one party rule in Columbus. People scratched each other's backs. People looked the other way when they had an ideological agenda to push. They didn't want to know any facts to get in the way, and that's the problem we have. Look, I got elected state treasurer in 2006 when we had the CoinGate scandal. You remember it. It was another example of one party rule. And we cleaned that up when I was treasurer, so that we cleaned up the state investments. We had the resignation of the Attorney General in 2008, and I cleaned up that office after that occurred. So I have a record of cleaning up corruption, and I will do it as governor.
Do your instincts tell you that this whole matter of the FBI investigation involving the just announced that he'll be stepping down Speaker, Mr. Rosenberger, is it your sense that's going to get worse before it gets better, and will that be an impactful issue in this race?
No question, Tom. People who are under investigation typically fight to clear their name, all right? For someone to resign immediately,
why did he fall on his sword?
He knows that he has no case. They may have wiretaps, they may have tapes, who knows what they have, but he was not willing to stay and fight it. Now, the other thing that's disturbing about this scandal to me is you have Attorney General DeWine calling him to advise him as to what he should do, knowing that the feds are investigating this, knowing that the FBI is trying to gather the facts, trying to get him to step aside, to slow the thing down, to quiet it down. And I heard some of your interview that you did with him today, and he admitted that he recognized that this could be politically damaging. And so we can only assume that's why he made the call. It wasn't because he thought that would assist the investigation.
So you think that call was inappropriate?
I think it was inappropriate. It was clearly done to try to protect himself politically. And now we're going to have to investigate that call and that element and whether it was an interference with the ongoing investigation. And he needs to pledge full cooperation with the FBI to investigate his conduct as part of this problem.
A recent U.S. News and World Report survey, they rank hospitals and they rank universities and they rank states. And the most recent survey regarding states, where they factor in just about all the variables you can think of: job creation and growth potential and quality of life and health care and financial stability. And when they crunched all the numbers, Ohio came in at 40th. Behind all of our neighboring states except for West Virginia and most of the states that were in the rear view mirror behind us from the deep, deep, deep south. Are you surprised by those findings?
I saw the survey that you described. I found it disturbing. I looked into it a bit to try to understand what they were rating and why. But it isn't all that surprising to me, because although there's been talk of this Ohio miracle and so forth, we have been lagging the rest of the nation in terms of job growth coming out of the recession, and by a pretty good margin. We have fewer jobs today than we had in 2001.
63 months in a row, I think we're behind.
All right.
the national average.
Can always count on you to have the numbers at your fingertips. But I'd say more than that. We have a legislature and leadership in Columbus that too often has looked back to the past rather than moving forward into the future. And I give an example, which is energy. In energy, we had moved forward with some strong standards in place on renewable energy, recognize that wind and solar are renewable sources that are the wave of the future, and this is where the world is moving, this is where the country is moving, and yet this legislature backed us up on wind, backed us up on solar, backed us up on those goals, and now we're lagging behind the other Midwestern states. And it's not just that we're behind on renewable energy. All of the jobs that come with it, the manufacturing jobs, building the wind turbines, building the solar panels, installing those, maintaining them. These are good jobs for Ohio.
So you believe that's a missed opportunity?
It's example of looking back to the past rather than looking to the future. I'll give you another example, and I said this last night in the debate. I was asked, how would you bring companies to Ohio? How would you bring businesses to Ohio? And I said, and it may be counterintuitive to some people, but I said, if we're going to attract businesses to this state, we have to be a progressive state. We have to aggressively stand for being a tolerant, inclusive, diverse set of communities in Ohio that welcomes and embraces the talents of everyone. That's what we have to be, because that's what companies are looking for. You saw in North Carolina where that legislature got into small-minded, hot-button ideological fights, and businesses suddenly did not want to go there. That can happen to Ohio, and I think it has been happening to Ohio, and we need to move into the future, and we need to be recognizing that we need everybody to be part of the economy in Ohio. We need to spread out economic opportunity, and we need to treat people fairly, and that's a big part of what will make our young people want to stay here and make businesses want to come here. And I'll give you an example of that. There is a bill in the General Assembly right now that would say that you can no longer discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation in housing.
Sponsored by Nikki Antonio.
And employment,
Lakewood.
that's correct, and in public services. Right now you can be married in the state of Ohio and immediately fired from your job or kicked out of your rental housing, and it is wrong. And the Ohio Chamber of Commerce has now for the first time endorsed that bill because they recognize these are the progressive principles we need to embrace if we're moving into the future. But the Ohio Republican Party is still fighting a rearguard action against gay marriage. They still refuse to acknowledge it. They don't want to accept it. Most of us have moved on from that. People are happily being married, even sometimes unhappily being divorced. We've moved on, and we need to move into the future.
So in your estimation, that bill needs to be passed?
I will strongly support that bill, and I'll fight for it.
Let's talk about other topics maybe don't get as much TV time. Discussion in some circles about a right-to-work law in Ohio. Mm-hmm. Most of our neighboring states have one, and well, we need one to compete. What are your thoughts about that, and whether it would be beneficial or damaging? Should it be adopted here?
I think it would be very damaging to have right to work in Ohio. And I believe that my views on this, which are very strongly felt, are accepted also and reflect those of the people of this state. 60 years ago, they tried to bring right to work in Ohio in 1958, and the people rejected it by 62% vote. It was on the ballot that fall. You fast forward to 2011, where the legislature had passed a repeal of collective bargaining in the public sector, and it went on the ballot to review the legislature's work, and people rejected it by 63% of the vote. No change in 50 years. The voters of Ohio support labor unions. They support people's right to work collectively to get better treatment in the workplace. And if right to work comes in Ohio, if it's brought up in the legislature and comes to my desk, I'll veto it. If it is an effort made to put it on the ballot, I will fight that. If it's on the ballot, I will oppose it. And we will beat it at the ballot, just as Ohioans have for 60 years.
Your position on a step-by-step kind of incremental approach to a increase of the minimum wage to $15 an hour. You would support that?
I do support that.
What kind of timeline would be acceptable to you?
Let me describe my experience with minimum wage in Ohio. Minimum wage was on the ballot in 2006. and for an increase in minimum wage. I supported it, and the people of Ohio supported it. It was unfortunately a small set of increases in minimum wage, and they've been incremental since, but like last year it was maybe 8 cents an hour. Nothing meaningful. It's lagged behind the rest of the country. We do need to increase the minimum wage. I believe that will actually increase jobs in the state because that money is spent into the economy immediately. But it's also a matter of fairness for people. People who work hard should be able to make a living wage. Now, we will need to do this incrementally. We'll need to do it over time, but we can get to $15 an hour. That's the ultimate goal here, and I think a lot of people share it. And what I would also say is that I've been around this country, in Ohio and around the country. When I worked at the Consumer Bureau, we did a lot of financial empowerment work. I know and have seen many people who make minimum wage. I started out my career making minimum wage at McDonald's. Wasn't much in that era. It was $2.30 an hour. Did not up very fast, but I was proud of the paycheck.
Were you at the window, or were you doing the fries, or what?
They never let me do the window. They had me doing the fries, and cleaning the parking lot. That was a big one they used to give me to do. But most people who work minimum wage don't even work just one job. They work 2 or 3 jobs, and they work some of the hardest jobs in our society because from one week to the next, they don't know how many hours they're going to get. You know, one week it might get 40 hours, the next week it might get 25. And that's economically difficult for you and your family. So it needs to be a living wage because it's difficult circumstances for people doing those types of jobs already, and they're working just as hard as the rest of us.
Payday lending. 10 years ago, the people of Ohio said, need to clamp a lid on payday lending. Lo and behold, somehow the payday lenders managed to reinvent their product and find a way to navigate through and basically keep doing what they'd been doing, charging astronomical interest rates. A bill in the legislature now, which I guess is there's pulling and tugging and going on. What should we do? Is there a fix? I think would cap interest rates at 28%. Are you supportive of a more definitive fix of the payday lending situation? Obviously you are, given your work with the Bureau.
Yeah, look, payday lending in Ohio is among the worst situations here than any state in the nation. We have the highest interest rates. They're almost 600%. It's unconscionable. That is not going to help somebody. That's going to ruin their lives, all right? We do have a bill in the legislature right now, and the legislature is unwilling to move it. And what we're now beginning to learn, and we need to know a lot more about it, is the Speaker of the House just resigned his position because of an FBI corruption probe that appears to involve lobbyists for payday lenders, favors, possibly in return for legislation. We'd like to know more. The public should demand
My
to know
understanding
more.
is there was some sort of a committee hearing today where the legislation could have moved on, and then suddenly the votes were not there.
Yeah, well, look, I have strong feelings on this subject. As you said, the last thing I did at the Consumer Bureau was finish a national rule on payday lending. I know that people may try to roll that back, but it's law of the land right now. I feel strongly about that in Ohio as well.
The one thing that your opponents, pick one, have said about you that you believe is most misleading or just dead bang wrong is what?
It's hard to pick just one. So, you know, various things get said, and you just have to let them roll off your back and not worry too much about them, and move forward and concentrate on your vision for the state.
So going back to those supposed, who are those people out there, the pundits and the observers, but some of them I think have framed this race as essentially a Mr. Cordray, Mr. Kucinich contest and said, well, the Democrats are left to choose between Mr. Kucinich, who is exciting but unrealistic, and Mr. Cordray, who is pragmatic but not very inspiring. What do you say to that?
Well, I believe it's my job to be inspiring, and that's what I need to do in this campaign. And by the way, I'm learning a lot from my running mate, Betty Sutton. She's a very dynamic figure, and I'm learning from her. I think that sometimes I do dive too deeply into the details of things because I want to let people know exactly what I want to do and how I want to try to make things better.
Our attention span isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, perhaps so.
So Betty Sutton, so obviously here is a very accomplished and
She is.
and skilled public servant. How are you going to use her specifically if you are elected? What hat will she wear, or hats will she wear?
So first of all, judge the governor's candidates by sizing up their running mates. There's no question Betty Sutton is by far the most accomplished of the running mates in this race. She is a 3-term congresswoman who has real results to show for her work. The cash for clunkers that helped save the auto industry, not only here but across the country. Her work on the health care, where she got the pre-existing conditions amendment to make that effective immediately, and many other things she did in her time in Congress and her career in the General Assembly. She's been at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. She is seasoned, tested, and she presents tremendously well. And I think we make a great pair. And she brings advantages to the table that I don't have, and I think I bring advantage to the table she doesn't have, and we make a great team.
So you believe she would be a very capable chief executive should somehow the scenario happen that she was put in that position?
Here's how I feel about Betty Sutton. She is working with me to lead this campaign. She will work with me to lead Ohio. If something were to happen to me, which could happen, she would be a great governor.
All right. So, walk-off question here. As we sit here today, and answer in one word or one phrase, please. Ohio's biggest single problem facing it today is fill in the blank.
I think we need to make this a progressive state we can be proud of, and then we will be a destination and an example to the country. And I think that that's what we should be doing in this race this year.
All right, Richard Cordray, thank you very much for your time,
Thank you.
and good luck to you on
Good to see you again,
May
Tom.
8th. Okay,
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Again, all our interviews are going to be posted on the Bliss Institute Facebook page and WKYC.com and the University of Akron's YouTube channel. Hope you've enjoyed our discussions with all 6 of the candidates. If you took the time to watch any or all of them, please take the time to vote May 8th. I'm Tom Beres. The Bliss Institute and I want to thank the candidates and you. Take care.
Hi, I'm President Matt Wilson at the University of Akron, and you're watching ZTV.
Hi, I'm Billy Pace here with Real Fake Organs, the organ specialist. These organs are made to be perfect and also a part of you.